13.45% of Fife home sales fell through in 2025. A number you probably weren't expecting, but before we get into it, let's QVT. Yes, you heard that right. 13.45% of agreed property sales in Fife did not actually complete. Now, you may be thinking, what does this actually mean for Fife homeowners? And this really is more important than any homeowner perhaps thinks, because
I would agree completely.
yeah, and
It's quite a surprising number. When we put this together, I was quite surprised by the number. I think if you look at it in Fife, where sales chains can often be longer, buyers are more sensitive to the price. It really can have a bigger impact, and it's quite surprising that that's such a large number. Agreeing sales is meant to guarantee a move, isn't it? And everyone gets excited by that. But then suddenly something comes out the work, and then it changes everything. And it's a thing here as well where, you know, properties are sold subject to missives. That's just a standard practice that we have in Scotland, isn't it? So sellers almost feel that once that's come through, then they've had their offer, it's in writing from the solicitor, it's all very formal. You can maybe go through a few weeks and then suddenly something goes wrong. And that can be quite upsetting for sellers and also for buyers, because the buyer wants to buy the home.
Obviously, yeah.
Something has changed that's made that not happen for them. So that can be quite a surprise for them as well. But I think for me, with that headline that you've mentioned, Sophie, at 13.45%, that actually equates to 1 in 7 house sales subject to including missives fall through.
Yeah.
That's quite a large number, 1 in 7.
Absolutely, 1 in 7. And you think, for example, I do the Fife property market update every week, and last week in Fife there was 109 sales agreed. So if you think of those 109 sales agreed last week, 1 in 7 of those are going to fall through, which you're absolutely right, is a number that people won't be expecting.
That's going to work out, if you think about that then. How many did you say? 100 and what was that?
109.
So 109. So if you think that's 1 in 7, so 70 would be 10, 35, 40, say, would be half of that again. So that's 15 of those houses that potentially won't move.
Yep. And as you
say, that sale will fall through and they'll need to market again to find the next buyer who can complete. So it's not necessarily, and this is the thing we need to be really clear on here, just because a house sale falls through doesn't necessarily mean that your house won't complete to sale. What it means is that particular buyer, for whatever reason, isn't ready to progress and something has changed in their circumstances. It could be their mortgage has been withdrawn. There could be a number of reasons why it happens. But actually, this is the power of also having really good marketing, because if your buyer does fall through, you need to have a plan B. So your marketing strategy really is everything, because if you've got anybody waiting in the wings for that house sale to potentially fall through, and we've had that, Sophie, haven't we?
Yep, absolutely.
We've had clients come forward and say, oh, I see that one's under offer now. If anything goes wrong with that, please call me, because that's the perfect house for me. So, you know, it's about your agent being proactive to try and find that second seller. So whilst 1 in 7 sounds a very dramatic number, just bear in mind that's only per buyer. There will always be another buyer. You only need one person to buy the house at the end of the day.
Absolutely, yeah. So to put it into context then, what we're saying is 782 Fife households lost their move to their future forever home, because, as we've discussed, that house sale fell through. 782. That is obviously, and this is what I'm saying, until you start to look at the facts and you educate yourself, a lot of people will be so unaware of this. They'll just see that sold board and go, oh, okay, that's it, done. There's obviously a lot more to it that goes on in the background. And it's not just within Fife, this is across the UK as well, because in 2025, the rate was 23.67%. Now in Scotland, it was only 12.17, but in the UK it was 23.67. So it isn't just obviously happening in Fife. Naturally, it is happening obviously throughout Scotland and throughout the UK.
That's quite an interesting. I think that's quite an interesting statistic actually, because when you said, Sophie, 1 in 7 Fife homes don't sell to that first, that buyer, I thought, oh, that's quite a high number. But actually, when you look at UK wide, where it's 1 in 4, Fife's actually almost half of the UK average. So actually, whilst that shouldn't be comfortable, it's a better position to be in, isn't it? And I think just the whole Scottish system is very different as well. So I think that makes it a bit easier for people to kind of progress to sales, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So do that comparison, it's quite a drift, isn't it?
Oh, 100%. So based on that, obviously you've touched on while we shouldn't be comfortable, it's still happening. We are in a more comfortable position versus obviously the UK. What can potential Fife homeowners do to reduce the risk, Perrie, would you say? And why do home sales fall through?
I think for me, actually, the biggest factor is that depending on how long that process is taking, sometimes the buyer can actually just change their mind. And they might be changing their mind for really good reasons. So if we think about the fact logically, and again, if you're not aware of this, you market your property, your pre-portal goes out for us. We market from day one, don't we? So the pre-portal goes out. 5 days later, your personal property tour goes out and it lodges to all the other websites, assuming we've not got a buyer in that pre-portal window, which often we do. So say you've done that, you've kind of in a 2-week process. Then say you get your buyer who comes along in that first 2 weeks, you're then a month into your marketing. Then your buyer with conveyancing, on average, at the moment, taking anything between 8 and 12 weeks. That's 3 months. So if you think about that logically, you're a month before you've got your buyer, you're potentially 3 months before you complete. So that's a 4-month window where that buyer is waiting. But it's also a 4-month window where that buyer may have changes in their circumstances. Their job might have changed. They may be having extra family. There might be a separation going on in that 4-month window. So, the kids may be starting a different school. There might be relatives they need to help. Life goes on and there's lots of things that change in people's lifestyles. And 4 months, if you think about it, that's a third of your year. If you think how quickly 2025 went, and if you think actually where we're at now, we're almost into the second month of 2026 already. So much happens in that window of time, doesn't it? So it's no surprise if the conveyancing process takes that length of time, then actually buyers can get to that point where they think, oh, actually, we're going to have to walk away from this because this change has happened in life. Or actually, what then may also happen, and again, it is unfair, but it does happen. We're at a period of time at the moment where there isn't a lot of stock. So potentially what could happen is suddenly we come into spring, there's an influx of properties coming to the market. Someone hasn't signed the missives yet because missives tend to happen maybe a couple of weeks before you move. And maybe they've made a compromise on buying your property. So, maybe it ticks 9 of their 10 boxes. But in that window of time that they've been sat waiting for this to complete, something comes along that ticks every box. And then suddenly they go, oh, hang on a minute, I'm going to change my mind. So that can happen. So for me, that's the number one thing. And it's just about time and no one can prevent that. It's just the process that it takes, isn't it?
100%. And it does happen, unfortunately.
Yeah. And that makes up for 1 in 3 sales. It's just someone changing their mind. So that's quite a dramatic when you think that it's 1 in 7 as a whole for all different reasons. And almost half of that 1 in 7 is just someone who changes their mind for whatever reason. Now, sometimes there could be really good reasons. There could have been a death in the family. There's multiple things that can happen. But for the seller, it's just so despondent because the chances are that they have probably found their forever home. But the key with that, as I mentioned earlier, is about having an agency that's also going to make sure you've got a plan B and you've got someone in the wings who can step in and just take that process forward. We've had that recently, Sophie, haven't we, where a sale had fallen through. There was a change for the buyer. It was an issue with their mortgage, but we had someone else in the wings. We didn't even take the sold board off. We just left it as sold because we contacted them, said, look, come back to market. Perfect, written offer in, and it was resold again on the same day. So it does happen. So
It does.
don't feel that that's a negative thing. It's about how you react to that negative thing and make that a positive story, isn't it?
100%. And it is all down to the agent at that point. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. But it is absolutely, because of that timeline that it takes, buyers can lose patience and get slightly frustrated. And sometimes we get that feedback through the process, because once a property is under offer, we are still engaged with our buyer and our sellers. And they will contact us, or we will contact them, and they will say, oh, it's just taking forever. I just want this to happen. And what if something goes wrong? And it's a long time of unease and nervousness for that buyer to wait. What if something goes wrong? That actually they get to a point where it's a pressure point and they just think, oh, this is too much and I'm just going to walk away from it.
It's the classic of being out of control. There's nothing that you can do. There's not. So they are so out of control. And something we say so often is it's your biggest asset in life. And so it's your biggest asset in life. And to be so out of control of it, it can obviously be really daunting, and you do get the frustration, absolutely, especially if there obviously is communication.
Exactly. And when I talk about that kind of 3 to 4 month window potentially of moving, when you think about it, 10 years ago, it was within 8 weeks you would move, you know. And I've had that situation where I've been out to value houses, and I was actually a person the other day who's launched with us, and they said, oh, well, that's fantastic, because ideally I'd really like to be moved by March. And I was like, you know, next week's February. The realistic chances of you moving in March, that's gold mine stuff if that actually does happen. Because actually, whilst it was 8 weeks of moving 10 years ago, it potentially could take up to 19 weeks from the start of the marketing point to your buyer to your move. And but people don't think about that. 19 weeks is a very long time when you think about it.
It is.
Yeah, so you know that's a big thing, isn't it? So it's kind of 4+ months that potentially you could be waiting. And I think when people have decided that they want to sell, they don't necessarily think that it's going to take that amount of time. They're thinking, well, I'm going to move now. And I'm like, well, actually, the chances of you moving before May/June are slim. It can happen, but actually it's slim.
Yep, 100%. And I think you're right. It's just a case of, well, I'm on the market now, I'm ready to go, but there is that whole process that comes with it. But obviously, we know this is our everyday, we're aware of that. And until you educate yourself and you know that, they are just all in that excitement and the buzz, and also the stress of the we're moving, as we say, forever home. So it is hard to not get caught up in that. Definitely.
It is very difficult to not get caught up in it, and it can really happen. And actually, one of the things I would always say to someone as well, and because I have had that recently that's happened, is that sometimes a seller will think, well, actually, I'm going to wait till I find something before I market the house. And inevitably, what will happen in that situation is they won't market their house yet. They'll find their dream home. They will then decide that they have to market it, and they'll contact and say, Perrie, I need to get marketed yesterday because I need to move. But actually, if you're not on the market yet or under offer, and you see something and you offer on that, there's no guarantee that you'll be the buyer, because that seller doesn't necessarily want to wait, because they've maybe been in this situation where they've been marketed for a few weeks. They've finally now found their place. You've now come along, and they're on a tight timeline now because the people they buy from have found their dream home and they want to move. So suddenly you've got all this pressure of time, and that can be really uncertain for a lot of people, and that can cause a lot of frustration. And then what happens there is potentially, as a seller, you miss out on your dream home because you didn't get ahead of the game and get marketed first. And people are always scared to do that, aren't they? We hear this often, Sophie, don't we? But what if I don't find something? I'm going to be homeless. That just won't happen.
No, because I was going to say, in all the years, never have we had anybody homeless, have we? We've always managed entry dates, extended entry dates. You just work it in along with the solicitor, and then you just work it in. But the key is communication, but trying to not put yourself under that immense pressure by doing obviously what you've just said.
Yeah, because that can make it really difficult for them. But actually, so the main thing, as I say, why sales will fall through is buyers change their mind. But the other thing that causes delays as well, and people don't think about this because they think it's quite a straightforward process, but actually your legal and your mortgage work takes time. And that's the part that takes the longest. Actually marketing your house and finding your buyers, if you've got the right marketing strategies, that's the really easy, quick part. The hard part is the delays with the legal side of things, and also with mortgage companies. And people think actually that's going to be the quick part. They think that all they need to do is get their buyer and it's done. But actually it's not. And one top tip that I would give anyone that's thinking of selling their property, the first thing, once you've engaged your agent, the next thing you need to do as your second step is get in touch with your legal representation and let them know you're selling your property, and get them to start that paperwork behind the scenes instantly, because that's the thing that slows things down. All the title reviews and everything your solicitor will need to do, that's the long drawn process that takes time, especially if you've got an older property or you've got a property that you've extended and certifications are needed. There's so much can come into play. And again, if you've got a mortgage lender, they have very specific guidelines that they need to follow. So they will need home reports to define certain things. They will have to make sure that all of these boxes are ticked in regards to certifications, building warrants, changes to the property, listed buildings. All these things can come into play and really can delay things. A lot of people will often think that that's something they don't need to really rush to do. I would say that's the second thing you need to do. As soon as you decide you're selling, you get your agent, you inform your solicitor, and if you need your mortgage, you get in touch with your broker, and you do those 4 things immediately. You don't wait.
No, because as well, there's a big element of you don't know what that solicitor's workload is currently like. So they need to then factor you into their workload. So they need to make allowances for that. So, and same for obviously a mortgage broker. If you are using a mortgage broker rather than going through your bank, again, you need to give them as much notice so they can factor you into their workload. That is a key thing.
And that's why as a seller, you really need to be on top of that. And also as a buyer. As a buyer, it's so important that you make sure that you've got your mortgage approved in principle. Because if you haven't gone that far and then you offer on a property based on the fact that you think you'll get your mortgage, and then it doesn't happen for you, it's so disappointing for you, but it's really, really seriously disappointing for the seller as well. So the things that really take time and where the bad communication can sometimes happen is between solicitors, mortgage arrangers, other people that are involved, your estate agency not maybe perhaps advising you that you need to do these things, and so you've not thought about it because you're selling your home and all you're thinking is, well, I just need to market my house. You're maybe not thinking about all these other steps that you need to take. So it really is important that you get that good guidance. But the next biggest reason is trouble getting a mortgage. Absolutely. And that is the key thing. So again, as I had said earlier, I would strongly recommend that before you even think about looking for properties, you make sure you can get a mortgage.
Yes, 100%. That should be the first point of call. And I think, again, this is just an education piece. A lot of people just naturally go towards, obviously, their bank, don't they, Perrie? They just go straight and try and get a mortgage with their bank. But we've kind of touched on mortgage advisors or arrangers. They're a fantastic point of call because they also do a lot of the work for you as well to take that pressure off, and they can guide you through that process. They also have a lot more availability in the marketplace to potentially get you better rates, potentially get you better deals. But also, they're also great, and they'll have a lot more experience perhaps if you haven't been in the UK for the allotted amount of time, if you're perhaps self-employed, all little things like that. They have access to more lenders, and they'll know potentially little loopholes to get you kind of pushed through that mortgage in principle stage. So don't just naturally go towards your bank, maybe explore it, but think about a mortgage advisor as well, because that could be an absolute godsend.
I would agree. Just look at wider options, because when it's people that do need a mortgage to buy their next home, absolutely what we're seeing when we've looked at these statistics is that just under 1 in 3 fall through properties of those 7 fall through because the buyer hasn't been able to secure the mortgage. So 1 in 3, that's a lot, isn't it? 1 in 3. So absolutely, 100%. You have to do all that groundwork first, because it's so disappointing for you if you've found your dream home. You've got all the excitement of that. It's disappointing for the seller. It's frustrating for yourself because it could be a really easy fix as well. And as you said, Sophie, that person may have just gone to the bank. The bank might not offer what they really ideally would like, but there is absolutely people out there who can assist them and get that mortgage in principle in place. So absolutely, you need to do that. Even buyers who seem solid at first on their initial chat with a mortgage broker, something can happen. Affordability checks take place. So, people can be quite flowery with information or maybe not understood what they've communicated. So your affordability checks is a really major thing. So whilst you think, well, actually, I can afford it on paper, you may be in rented accommodation at the moment and you're paying a high rent payment and your mortgage payment might be less than that, for instance. But actually on paper, with all of the lifestyle considerations that need to be taken into account by a mortgage broker and lender, you might not be able to afford it, even though it's less than your rental payment, because they have to do those affordability checks and all the different lifestyle points come into that. So that's something you really need to consider. You know, hidden debts come into play as well. You might have historical issues with your credit. Those still have to be coming into play. You know, you may have court judgments against yourself that you think, well, actually, I don't need to pay that. But actually, on paper, a money company will need to take those into account, that you have to pay it, and they'll take a budget payment into account with that as well. So that could be the whole reason of why your mortgage doesn't come through. So initial chats with a mortgage advisor or mortgage arranger, as you said, is absolutely the best thing that you can do to make sure you've got that affordability check in place, that your hidden debts are clarified, that you've got anything that's maybe historically bad credit, that's taken into account. Also, actually, what could happen is that you see a property, you offer on it, you may not have taken into account the fact that, because again, it's maybe your first property and you've never really thought about this, but some people actually don't appreciate that you can't borrow more money than a house is worth. So, you know, a home report value, say 100,000, generally, the maximum you can borrow on that is 95% of that 100,000. And what may happen is you might have thought, well, actually, because the market the way it is in this location, I'm going to have to offer 104 to get it. What some people don't necessarily appreciate is that the bank are not going to give you that 4,000. You need to have that 4,000. You also need to have the 5% deposit to the 100,000. So there's another 5,000. So that's £9,000 you need to have to just offer on that house. And that's before you've taken into account your legal fees and any expenditure that you might have. So not always do people really appreciate that. And what sometimes can happen as well, the home report might be 100,000. Your lender, for whatever reason, may say, well, actually, we want to get an independent one done. They may get an independent home report done. That independent home report then comes in at 95,000. But our seller still wants 100,000 that you've offered. You've got to find another 5,000. So all these things can come into the mix that actually aren't necessarily considered.
Yep, definitely. And again, it's just that classic, not everybody will be aware of this, will they, Perrie?
No, they won't. And also what you have to think about as well is if you get an approval in principle and you've had that feedback from your mortgage provider, sometimes they're only valid for 90 days.
Yes.
So if you've not found something in 90 days and then you find something, saying, you know, you've not seen anything in that 3-month window, but in month 5, your dream apartment or home comes along and you offer for it, then you realise that actually your approval in principle is expired, you reapply, you might have changed jobs. Suddenly you can't get your mortgage.
Yeah.
You know, maybe your income's changed, maybe interest rates have changed and the mortgage payment's gone up now. And the affordability check doesn't comply. So there's so many things that can come into play here. So these are the things that are really important to do at the beginning. So one of the things I would also say about that is when you're looking at a mortgage broker, never go to your maximum, because if something does change or rates improve, and I mean improve by actually the increase rather than actually decrease, which hits you as far as your affordability, because your payment might have been 300 and now it's 350, so on paper that doesn't work. So give yourself that little cushion as well, I would always say. So never maximize it. Give yourself a cushion in case something does go untoward, and then the chances are that you will still be able to have your mortgage. But that, out of the buyers that fall through, it is generally 1 in 3 nearly are people who struggle eventually to then get their final sign off on their mortgage, and those are generally the reasons why it happened.
Okay. And then
I think as well, as we said earlier about the survey renegotiations, you know, a mortgage broker might want it resurveyed and then suddenly it's not 100, it's 95. So that could be a problem. They might overvalue it and then suddenly it puts it out of your price range. So that's something that you really need to be making sure that you're all on top of as well, as far as paperwork at the beginning. So, you know, for that to be one in, if you look at the surveyor point of view, and again, if your mortgage, which they're entitled to, because the written offers will come in from the solicitor saying that the lender is the sole decider on what home report should be used, if they decide to get another home report done, that doesn't comply with the original home report for whatever reason. It may be they found additional faults that weren't noted in the previous home report. It could be the value has changed. And out of the 1 in 7, 1 in 5 of fall throughs happen in that window. And people don't often think about that. They just think, well, I've had my home report done, everything's fine. Well, actually, it's not fine.
No.
So that can really cause problems. But also happens in that instance as well, if the mortgage supplier then says, well, we need a new home report done, and their home report comes in at 95 when originally the home report was 100, and your buyer has offered you 100 because that's what your house was worth, and now the mortgage company is saying it's 95, then actually the renegotiation of that price point as well, then the buyer potentially is going to come back to you and say, I know we agreed 100, but I can't give you 100 now, I can only give you 95. You as the seller, you've maybe already bought your next place and you're thinking, well, actually, all my budgeting has been done on the fact I'm getting 100. So I actually can't move now either. So I can't sell to you unless you can find that other 5,000 to give me.
Yeah, you do. Then you hit stalemate, don't you? Nobody can then move on.
And I think when that happens as well, buyers sometimes can actually use that as a reason to offer less.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And you'll even see it. Yeah, they get the new report done and it maybe says the 95 for argument's sake, but then they actually go, do you know what? I'm only going to offer you 92 now because of the rigmarole. So sometimes they even do that as well.
Yeah. And so you as a seller actually could be very much out of pocket if you stick with that buyer. And then sometimes that's why 1 in 5 of those people decide that that's not for me. That doesn't work for me now. I'll move on and find someone else who can pay what I need them to pay to make my life work. So there's a lot of that comes into play as well. And if sellers say no, that's it. The sale falls through.
Yeah, as easy as that, isn't it?
And I think the key thing for me, and this is the encouraging part, actually, the next bit for me, I think is really encouraging, because people will often say to me, oh, I hear properties are falling through because all the chains, like, through 5 or 6 people and the chains are always breaking down. That's what everyone's telling me. But firstly, who's everyone? Because is that your auntie? I don't know. But you have to get good advice. But the key thing for me here, which I think is really encouraging, is that actually, while we say the average in Fife is 1 in 7, well, actually, only 1 in 8 is where the chain breaks down. So that actually buffs out of the average and is a better position to be in. So that makes that a smaller category for me, which I'm really quite impressed by, because when you do hear people say, oh, the chain's always breaking down, it's never going to work, or I want a first-time buyer, or I want a cash buyer, or I don't want anybody buying my house that is selling their house. Well, actually, 9 out of 10, it's going to be someone who's got a house. It's very rare now to get cash buyers because of all the second taxes for homes and things. They're just not around as much as they were in the past. So there is a mentality where no matter how best you try it, there is always potentially going to be a chain unless you've got a first-time buyer. But the fact is that is the best category as far as performance goes, where it's only 1 in 8. So I think that for me, that's really encouraging, actually. And that's something that sellers should really take as a strong positive. Because it does challenge the long belief for me that people think that chains are the reason why houses fall through. It's not. Sometimes buyers are chancers. Sometimes they just want a little bit extra for less. And that's what you have to factor in. But it's not because the chain's broken down. That's not holding up moving processes. So for me, that's really encouraging. And actually, when you're in a chain, the chances are, we had a situation last month, didn't we, Sophie, where we had 5 houses in a chain. All of them were buying and selling with us, which was so much simpler, of course, because we knew what was going on with every case. And the move date changed 3 times. But working together as a team with those 5 sellers and 4 buyers, it made it really easy. So it can work well if everyone's communicating and everyone is committed to the process.
Communication is absolutely key, because we've actually had some quite long change recently. Obviously, there was that one obviously for the Leavenmouth area. There was one in the East Neuk that was 4 houses, and again, all managed by ourselves. And you're absolutely right. The key comes down to communication is a big thing, and also an agent that is going to work for you. And that's why, and as you say, it's encouraging to see that chains are common. It's just how you manage them.
Exactly. And the fact that actually that's the least risky one out of the pot is quite a surprise to me when we've done this and looked at these numbers. But I think for me, it's a really positive thing as well. But actually, when you have a chain like that, and as you mentioned earlier about the agents and having an agent that works for you, manages you, as agents as well, we thoroughly vet all buyers. So when we have first-time buyers, or we have buyers maybe that for whatever reason have contacted the seller direct, they haven't come through ourselves, they've agreed jointly between them an offer because they've cut the agent out. Those are the ones actually that generally go wrong because the buyer hasn't been properly vetted. We had a situation recently where that happened, and then it turns out the buyer hadn't even applied for a mortgage. But because they hadn't come directly to us and they did it privately between them, they've now withdrawn from the process because they can't get a mortgage. So we've wasted that window of time as far as the seller is concerned. But actually, we could have been proactive and said right at the beginning, that's not the buyer for you because they've not even got a mortgage in place yet. So, you know, the fact that we, before the viewing even takes place, thoroughly vet the buyers. We understand if they've got their mortgage in principle, if they're selling a house, is it on the market, who with, if not us? If they say they're cash buyers, well, what does a cash buyer really mean? Is cash they've got money in the bank, or is cash buyer when I've sold my house, I'm a cash buyer? Two very different things. So it's about really understanding all of that information. And I think that will help the chains be solid. But it's when people go a little bit off piste and don't follow these stats and these rules and guidelines that we're providing. And if you've kind of joined this and you're thinking, oh, actually, that has happened to me and you want more detail, you know, we're not giving you every kind of word that's on our presentation here today. So click on the link and you've got the full blog of what we're discussing, and you can read through it, and it will give you the guidelines, and it will really help you move forward in regards to if you're kind of just starting your journey with selling and buying. So we've talked about that, and I think for me, the 1 in 8 and the chain, that for me is a really glorious positive number. But all those other ones, out of the 1 in 7, Sophie, what is the cost of sales falling through in Fife? In numbers, in real terms, what does that mean? Okay, not emotion, not in delay, but actual monetary terms. What does that mean?
Monetary terms, yeah. So in 2025 then, so for the UK, there was 258,000 house sales in the UK fell through. Now, the House Buyer Bureau says the average cost to someone when a house sale falls through is roughly 3,337, which is, when you think that kind of cost, that's perhaps your agency fees, perhaps it's your solicitor's fees. Like, for obviously your house sale to fall through, 3,337, that is a hefty number when you think and you put that into obviously terms of what things are costing. That then means 860 million was lost in failed house sales in 2025 alone. Now, that was just obviously UK based. Now, to put it in terms for Fife, this meant that home movers lost 2,609,534 to failed house sales in Fife, which is obviously, so you had 860 for the whole of the UK, and Fife was just over 2.5 million, we'll say. In 2020.
When you think about that, it's not just the cost of estate agency fees, legal fees, it's costs of, if you're a first-time buyer, you've been continuing to pay rent. If you're maybe a homeowner and it was a second property, you've continued to pay council tax on both properties. So it's not just costs actually associated with the physical sale, it's the surrounding costs as well, isn't it?
Yes, the snowball effect, absolutely.
Yeah.
So obviously people like to hear the monetary terms, we like to put it in monetary value. So if you're watching the show, you're probably thinking, okay, you're giving me all these numbers and facts and figures, but is there anything that I can actually do to reduce the chance of this happening? How can I reduce this risk? Now, obviously, there is kind of no single bullet to reduce the risk of a sale falling through. It really is, as I mentioned at one point, it's almost out with your control. If we do all the things we spoke about, like your agency doing the due diligence, you getting yourself prepared beforehand and pulling everything together, out with that, there is an element of it is out with your control. Yes, there are some steps that you can do to reduce the odds of a sale collapsing. First one that we've obviously touched on a good few times, but to get into more detail, is absolutely choose the right Fife estate agent. Now, what I would say based on this is, because this is obviously a show about sales falling through, Perrie and I, if you go on our website, we did a blog a couple of months ago, and it was 15 questions to ask your estate agent. and that is a fantastic blog that we did. It gives you everything to consider when picking an estate agent, which ties in really well with this, because choosing the right Fife local estate agent, may I add, is absolutely crucial and will help eliminate, obviously, being part of that 1 in 7 statistic. Because yes, the best estate agent isn't just about fees or their price. And that is a big driving force for people. Obviously, when they are picking an estate agent, they think about those initial upfront fees, when actually you need to think about the end result and what it's going to mean for you in your property journey. And it's not only about finding that buyer, it's about making sure you actually move. And that is the key here. The work, obviously you have all the work beforehand, as Perrie's touched on, your marketing, the pre-portal, the personal property tour. There is all of that element that comes into the marketing, but then you have all the work when the sale is agreed as well. You need your estate agent that is going to do that due diligence. They're going to take care of the viewing and really drill down what that buyer's looking for. Are we getting the right signals from them? Then obviously we go through the conveyancing stage. Yes, naturally that's where the solicitors do take obviously more of the workload on, but your agent is still there to keep those communication pieces open, to still get you those updates if you perhaps aren't getting them from your solicitor. We still help move it along. And we are still perhaps in the background, Perrie obviously touched on as well, people maybe still phone up because they still see the personal property tour on YouTube or on the website, and we go, oh, that one is actually under offer. However, we'll put you on a standby list just in case. The agent is still working for you in the background, and good estate agents really do manage that process closely, setting clear expectations, just like obviously you had to do, Perrie, with that client when you said moving in March is it's not really going to be the time scale. And it was having that frank conversation, not just nodding along, going, yeah, that's not a problem, we can do that, and making false promises, because that's no use to anybody. It is about that. It is about that communication being open. And again, another estate agent that knows what they're doing can potentially spot problems or start to get, it's almost like that sixth sense, isn't it, Perrie? Something starts to niggle and you do, and it's almost like potentially spotting a problem or getting ahead of it before it actually arises, before it potentially becomes a deal breaker.
Yeah, so I think that's really clear. And it's like that example I mentioned earlier, where actually for whatever reason, the potential buyer has gone direct to the seller. And then when the agent is out of the loop, I don't know what your thoughts are on this, Sophie, but certainly for me, I feel very uncomfortable with that because I have not had time to vet that potential buyer. And those are the ones 9 times out of 10 that go wrong because that process has been missed out in that timeline. And it's such a crucial part of getting that sale across the line, because nothing happens if that buyer's not the right buyer. And you don't want to be going through a process of weeks of waiting and then suddenly it falls through. And that will happen sometimes. And I get why it happens, because the seller's excited, they think they've secured their buyer. But the reality is that person actually was never in a position to buy that house. So you've wasted your own time, you've spoiled your own dreams, you've maybe found your next place that you can't have now because that's been the wrong person. So it's vital that if anyone is marketing property and someone approaches you direct to potentially buy it, redirect them to the agent, because the agent needs to do that vetting process to allow them to do exactly what you say, Sophie, and work with them to prevent the deal-breaking moments happening.
Absolutely. And touching on that then as well, and I think you'll feel the same with this, even if we do the initial vetting and perhaps the seller does the viewing and everything's accepted, even at that point, still be very wary. We'll often have obviously sellers and buyers, and at the viewing they'll exchange numbers and then they're in contact constantly during conveyancing, and it still potentially is a risk and a detriment to the sale at that point because things get too comfortable, you start talking too much. And even at that point, even if your agent does the initial vetting and everything's great, sometimes over communicating directly between the two parties has had a detriment as well. And again, we've had experience of that. So again, just be really careful. There's experts there for a reason. You're investing in them, you're paying their fees, let them do what they do. Take that pressure off yourself, because that's all it's doing. It's putting you under extra pressure at the end of the day. It's your biggest asset in life. So why are we going to risk it when you've got the experts there that know what they're doing? While obviously it's our job to encourage you to act quickly on legal, as Perrie's mentioned, and the surveys and the mortgage steps, because obviously those can create delays. In today's market, where sales can fall through, you should judge an agent on not just how fast they act, or how strong their marketing is, or where their reach is, or how often they perhaps sell, or how many boards they've got in that street, but actually take a look at how many agreed sales actually concluded, moved on, people got moved on in their journey. That is the thing to look at as well, not just how many boards that they've got up. That is a key thing to look at. But what would you say, obviously choosing the right estate agent, naturally then, Perrie, what would you say the second thing is?
Again, it goes back to the point I made earlier on. The second thing you should be doing is instructing your solicitor. And if you haven't got one in place, then advise your agent, because your agent should be able to give you someone that they have worked closely with that can help you. So as soon as your property goes on the market with your chosen agent, you really should soon after that be instructing your solicitor. I actually tell my client at sign up point, even when I'm there on the day and they've committed to me, I say to them, right, the next thing you need to do is get in touch with your solicitor and let them know you're selling your property. And I do that straight away, because for me, that's really important. Doing it after you've got your offer will further delay the process. So when we spoke earlier on about it potentially being 19 weeks to sell, if you've waited 3-4 weeks under offer to then go, oh, I haven't told my solicitor yet, you've just added all that time that's been waited to that end time. So suddenly that becomes another 4 weeks delay of moving, because the paperwork still needs to be done by a solicitor. So for me, it really can save weeks of delays. So it's really important. And it also reduces any uncertainties that you might have. If there's problem with the titles, for instance, it's great to know that to begin with. If there have been extensions and they don't have building warrants, if it's in a nature reserve and windows have been changed, if groundworks have been done and they thought they didn't need planning and actually turns out that they do, there's so many things can come into play at that point. So the sooner your solicitor acts on that, the better, because it can become really frustrating if each week then suddenly something's come a cropper that needs to be uncovered. And sometimes the more a solicitor will dig, the more that they will find. So really important that you get that journey started really quick with your solicitor. What should they then be doing as a third thing? So we've done choosing the agent, we've done instructing your solicitor. What's after that then, Sophie?
Yeah, third thing, and you actually just touched on it, to be honest, Perrie, is about gathering all that paperwork. You know, it's your title deeds for the property. Now, you may not perhaps have a copy. They may be sitting with the solicitor from when you purchased it, perhaps. But as you've touched on, Perrie, it's those work certificates if you require any guarantees, anything like that. Even if perhaps you have had works done to the property, perhaps there was, I don't know, signs of wood infestation or damp, and you've had all the work done and you've got the reports, get that paperwork ready, because that is absolutely crucial. If you've got the guarantee and you can show that the work's been done, have everything like that. And it's always funny because you'll go out to appointments and you'll get it as well, Perrie. You'll get clients and they'll go, you're going to laugh at me. I've got everything. I've got it all papered and I've got it all filed away and I'm all organized. And they're like, oh, and I'm like, that's brilliant. Perfect. That's what we want. And you get and they come, it's almost like the filer fax with everything in. Fab. Yep. Have that ready with absolutely everything in it. And then it just makes it such a smoother process when you are able to then obviously hand all that on. Next one, Perrie, and this is a big one. Big one. What would you say number 4 is?
I think we both know this. It's realistic price setting. Pricing your Fife home for me is absolutely crucial. It's one of the best ways to avoid a sale falling through, would be my feedback on that. Only 53.5% of UK houses that listed actually sell, when we looked at those numbers earlier on. And if the property is on the market for more than a 12-week window as well, the chances of the sale actually completing drops by another 14%. So absolutely, having your pricing at the right price point is vital for you to ensure that your property sale completes the way that you want it to complete, and that you get to the timelines that you want as well. Because if you have not priced it correctly, and we call it kind of the 3 Ps. So, you know, if you're happy with the photos, you're happy with the presentation, you're happy with your video presentation, your wording presentation, then really the third thing then is the price. So if photos are good, presentation is good, and it still isn't selling, then it's generally because price is wrong. And for me, that's really important to get that right.
100%. Absolutely. Because actually, when you look at it, I'm just looking at the figures just here, and you've maybe noticed I forgot my glasses today as well. Only 53.5% of UK's homes that actually listed sold. And if a property is on the market for more than 12 weeks, its chance of selling drops to just 14.5%. Now, that is obviously UK based, but 14.5% if it's not sold within those first 12 weeks. Now, remember, one needs to find a buyer to get a sale agreed position, and realistic price homes do tend to sell quicker than those that are not. And actually, really interestingly, how quickly the home sells has a huge difference on whether that house sale falls through. Homes that agree a house sale within the first 25 days have a 94% chance of completing, compared to a really shocking 56% if the sale is agreed after 100 days. So almost half, which is a scary number when you think about it. You're entering that marketplace with the view to get moved and moved on in your journey. So only 56%.
Exactly. And I think for me, the key thing when we talk about the pricing being set right, if the pricing is set right for the property, a staggering 135% will complete to sale. That's like an 80% swing from what you've just described there. That is huge. So it's absolutely the most crucial thing. I know it's the last thing that we've mentioned, almost. It's, the fourth out of them. But for me, it absolutely is key.
Yes. 100%.
And the reason we mention it at the end is because those numbers are so staggering. It really does hit home that actually pricing is everything. And getting that accurate really does make a big, big difference. 135% of properties will complete to sale if the price is right.
Wow. And then finally, Perrie, make sure your buyer is properly checked. And to be fair, we have spoke about this quite a lot throughout the show about doing that due diligence. Now, there obviously is a lot of things that can be done via the estate agent and via the solicitor when it is coming down to the due diligence, like the proof of funds. And we have done it before where we have not accepted offers until we have had the solicitor say to us, they have seen funds. We can categorically say they have funds available. Yes, they had a cash buyer, a mortgage agreement in principle, and also understanding the buyer's situation. Do they perhaps have that property to sell? Are they perhaps in rented that they need to obviously give notice, or are they moving from out of area that actually they need to give notice at work, for example? There's all these different contributing factors, but these checks matter almost just as much as the offer do. Otherwise, it's going absolutely nowhere.
Agreed. And I think for me, that's really a clear thing of making sure that you are in the right position and that you've done those checks and that everything is prepared properly, because otherwise it is going nowhere, as you say. I think for me, before putting your home on the market, it's about also taking that time really to consider all of the things that you need to consider, rather than just jumping straight in without those considerations, because then that's your fail safes, by making sure you've done your due diligence. So we've talked a lot about agencies, solicitors, mortgage people doing due diligence, but you as a seller need to do your own due diligence as well. And I think that's really important. So consider using the tools as well, that you're looking at the portal sites, you're really deep dived into your agency. You've looked, as you said, Sophie, to not necessarily how many boards they've got out there, but actually how many of the properties do complete to sale and complete, and at what price are they completing, because that's really where your decision factor comes into play. And as we mentioned as well, it's about instructing your solicitor early. It's making sure you've got your approval and principal agreements in place. All of these steps, if you do that, really do remove a lot of the risk, and they will make a massive difference to whether you will be part of that 1 in 7.
Absolutely.
And that's it for me.
Perfect. What a great way to end the show. And if there's anything at all anybody has questions, anything at all, feel free to put it in the comments and we will obviously come back to you. But for now, all the best.
Take care. Bye for now.